Yuito! Here goes!
The thing about reviewing games is that you kind of have to beat them before reviewing them, and this proves to be troublesome when most games are shit. I tried to push myself to play through Black Mirror, but there is nothing worse than a long, boring and slow-paced adventure game with shit puzzles, and I just couldn't do it. I gave Greedfall a chance, but a game that mediocre and generic have no business being 50 hours long. The fact that people are comparing it to peak BioWare truly proves that people have no standards. The reason I am bringing this up is that I was committed to beating Scarlet Nexus so that I could review it, and if not for this, there is no way in hell that I would have played through this game, and a great slog, which is the last couple of missions. But I am getting ahead of myself. Scarlet Nexus is a third-person action game. The setting takes place far in the future, where a weird mist is covering the globe, and occasionally it is raining monsters. Thankfully, most people have turned psychic, and with the help of advanced technology where everyone is connected to some wacky supercomputer, humanity is fighting back. You play as either Yuito or Kasane, and will lead a squad of psychic teenagers fighting against monsters. Some of them are actually older, but due to aging restriction technology, they are kept in teenage limbo. For some reason, I never fully understood why. The setting can be a bit tricky to understand, and there is a lot of jargon and fluff being thrown around, but the core of it is that monsters show up every now and then, and an anime squad of teenagers need to get rid of them. Putting it this way, you might recognize the plot and think that the game has a throwaway generic storyline. It is kind of true actually, but the game is spending a lot of time on its story, and there are constantly long cutscenes which slows down the pacing. It is just a shame that the story isn't very good.
There's something wrong with Yuito's brain.
At least not Yuito's story, which is the one that I played. I found it to be a big mess actually. Scarlet Nexus has the kind of story which just continues to introduce new plot points and elements while doing very little with them. I had a look at the Steam reviews, and I found someone else remarking on this.
You son of a bitch!
People like to talk shit about Steam reviews, but I think there is a lot of wisdom there, as long as you ignore the joke reviews. The person put it in a slightly different way, but the way that I like to visualize it is like a juggler who keeps on adding new objects to the juggling, and at the first glance this will look very flashy and impressive, but if you pay attention then it will become clear that the juggler is not actually catching most of the objects, and it's just a guy throwing shit in the air hoping that no one will notice. You can deal with this in different ways. One way is to throw your hands up in the air and say that, oh boy, this story sure is complicated and I'm just not smart enough to understand it. Or you could grow some balls and say that this is bloated, incoherent and sloppy storytelling. I started to write down a bunch of examples to really prove my point home, but that would make the video way too long, so you are just going to have to trust me on this one. Bottom line is that the main story sucks. Even a bad story though can still be enjoyable if the characters are fun, but the main crew of characters are painfully generic anime stereotypes and there is very little in terms of humor. And the end result is then a lot of gameplay breaking, slow-paced cutscenes where generic and uninteresting anime characters take a stupid and incoherent plot way too seriously. I did like the little guy Luca though, who was obsessed with getting ripped. That was both relatable and fun.
Protein is well known to people who like exercise. It's nothing to be surprised about.
The English voice acting is decent, and there are some nice background music in the game. Visually, the game looks decent, but nothing truly impressive. The environments can look a bit boring though, and I am not a fan of the monsters. My friends keep on spamming me with screenshots of guys in cool armors fighting monsters from Elden Ring, and here I am fighting flowers wearing heels. The biggest drawback of the presentation though is how much is reused. You keep revisiting the same places and seeing the same thing, and it gets old before the end of the game, which is a nice enough segue to talk about the gameplay. Scarlet Nexus is actually at its core a decent action game. There are a lot of options available to you, which all blends nicely together. You have the normal slicing and dodging, telekinesis power, and some Super Saiyan modes. And then you can activate your companion abilities to do anything from turning you invisible to Iron Man. It can be rather fun, even though the combat is also very chaotic and messy, which won't appeal to everyone. It never clicked with me to the extent where I would call it great, but it was enjoyable, at least to start with. Scarlet Nexus has really poor enemy and level variety. Even in main missions you will revisit the same places many times, and it gets boring fast. The enemy variety is the worst culprit though, and the game will keep on throwing the same encounters and bosses at you over and over again, but with a little more health, and the game becomes a chore. I can't stress enough how bored I was the last part of the game, and if this game would be 12 hours instead of 25, then I would have left it with a much more positive opinion. The game also have the usual bloat with worthless side quest, an inventory and crafting system which could have been removed with nothing being lost, and a skill system which is okay at best. The level design and mission design is also boring and consists of long sequences of tunnels and arenas that goes on for all eternity. I don't want to be negative.
I am picking up negative energy.
But even though Scarlet Nexus have good points to it, I still feel that both the gameplay and the story is wasting my time, and I leave the game with a negative feeling. If I could send a message back in time, like in Steins Gate, then maybe, just maybe, I would tell the younger version of myself to skip this game. That doesn't mean that it is an awful game, and if you like the genre or have a lot of free time on your hand, then sure, give it a go. But time is precious, and if you are a young, modern, successful man like me, then you need time to do laundry and doing the dishes, and a game like this just doesn't cut it.